As a salesperson, to engender that positivity in you every day, you must start your day very strongly saying to yourself, I like myself, I love this world. I like myself, I love this world.
Hi guys, today I had the pleasure to sit down with my dear friend Sameer Deshpande, and we sit down and we unpacked his journey working in private banking and wealth management for the last 3 decades, working in India, Australia and Singapore in regional and global roles. As a pioneer and someone that led many investment teams, it was an absolute pleasure, and I hope you guys enjoy the chat as much as I did. Cheers.
Sometimes it is not always about getting deal and getting revenue. It's about an individual activity. If you feel successful about it, it just adds to your confidence, adds to your positive mindset. The significant turning point was probably my move to Australia. That was probably a milestone. I think if I had not done that, things may have gone into a very different direction. The risk that I took, it also taught me there is value in taking calculated risks and they work out. Any organization, there is only one CEO. There's only those 3 or 4 or 5 people who are part of the executive team. It's a pyramid. Not everyone is going to go to the top. How do you keep growing personally? How do you keep growing professionally? My life was so rich because the type of different jobs that I did never made me feel empty. Enjoying horizontal growth, it enriches you considerably and allows you that longevity in the industry. When I retire from the industry, those people whose lives I've touched, either because they were clients or they were colleagues or they were people working for me, if they look back on the conversations with a positive memory, we liked working with this guy. That is success.
Sameer, good morning.
Very good morning. Pleasure to be here.
How are you, brother?
Very good.
It's good to see you.
Likewise, good to see you.
Thank you. So for a few people that may not know you in our industry, there aren't going to be many because, you've held senior ranking positions for a long time. Can you give a quick intro to who you are?
As I say on my LinkedIn profile, I am a banker by profession, an investor by choice. I've spent the last 3 decades in the financial services industry across 3 different countries, India, Australia, and Singapore. And very much embrace financial services and banking in particular as a way of my life.
I love that. What a great intro. When you say you're an investor by choice and a banker by trade, what for you is the difference between the two?
Well, actually, I could alternate it as well if I wanted to. But so as I said, growing up, I was probably considered an academically above average student. Never quite at the top of the class, never quite the straight A kind of a guy. But the general direction of travel always for, that era was you had to go into science and you had to sort of be an engineer or you had to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And partly, perhaps me not liking science that much, liking maths more, partly it was a rebellious streak. I wanted to show them that, you could have a different life. So I chose commerce, accounting, and, sort of very quickly financial services was established as the dream sort of profession and industry for me. And banking just happened to be a subset of that. And so, ever since I stepped into the industry, I've enjoyed every moment of it. To date, I have not been sort of tired of it. So that's why banker by profession. And interestingly, I find that a lot of people start out as traders. And then suddenly one big trade goes wrong and they're sitting on a big loss. And that trading position turns into an investment. And that has happened to me in the past, right? I mean, back in 2011, I remember when the US lost its AAA rating for the first time. Suddenly, a few trades went wrong and a pot of losses. And I was forced to be an investor. And I decided then that that was the last time I would be forced to be an investor. Since then, I've been an investor by choice. And I've sort of remodel the way I think about my investments.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that whole perception is everything. And funny you talk about that. I was talking to someone yesterday about he's a business owner. He's thinking about going into corporate. And I said to him, most people that I know that have gone into entrepreneurship because it was a forced decision, it tends not to last.
Yeah.
And I think, how you go into something is everything.
Totally. I think to me, the passion that you have for a certain job or an activity is the only thing that sustains you in the long run.
Yeah.
For the short period, you can still do it because you kind of force yourself to do it. But over 10, 20, 30 years, it's just impossible to do it unless you have passion for it.
Yeah, and it becomes very obvious. When you meet people, this guy's jaded.
Yes.
He's on his way out.
Yes.
I'm curious, you lived in those 3 different countries.
Yeah.
Which one did you feel the greatest affinity with?
Well, Singapore's been the longest, right? So 20 odd years here. Clearly, it has become home for me. So I would say top of the rank is Singapore.
Yeah.
I would say though that I've enjoyed. I mean, I grew up. I was born and I sort of spent a lot of my early childhood in India. So the basic homeland affinity continues, and I quite enjoyed my stay in Australia as well. It's a
Yeah.
very different perspective to life that people take here. Generally, Australians were considered laid back at that point, but I found that wasn't the case. There was a lot of people who were very hardworking, and they were both hard when they worked very hard as well. But they,
They
kind
played
of
hard.
Yeah,
They
that's
played
right.
hard.
That's
I just got back from Sydney last week, and what my observation was, because I hadn't been back there for Sydney specifically for 18 years, it's actually just their mannerisms, the way they talk. They're a little bit more relaxed, but everyone's on the go.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those places. I was staying with family in Vaucluse, and there's so much money there. You realize,
It's one of the top shots there.
it
Yeah.
was crazy. But they had this beautiful property next to it, another beautiful property. Some Chinese multi-millionaire bought it, has never lived in it for 7 years. It's crazy.
That is true. And then Australia, of course, the affinity to sports.
Yeah.
They all love sports, and for me, sports has been a way of life. So I've enjoyed my stay there completely.
What sports did you grow up doing?
Well, as a Indian growing up in India, cricket was always something at the top of your list. But over time, football has been a passion, both following football as well as watching.
Who do you support?
I'm a lifetime Gunners fan, Arsenal.
The funny thing is, I'm a Gunners fan because in England, it's meant to be the team closest to where you live.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, it would have been Watford, but they were not in the Premier League at the time. But I don't watch it anymore. I've got, maybe because of the time difference, it's eroded over time. Who's your favorite Arsenal player?
Well, all time, I mean, I really adored Thierry Henry.
I knew you were going to say that.
It was just, he was magic. And
Yeah.
it was one of the reasons I started following Arsenal. I think, today there's a whole bunch of players, but the latest kid on the block, Max Taumann, he was here, when Arsenal were visiting.
Yeah,
He's something else, something to sort of watch out for in the next decade or so.
for sure. I had John Dykes on the show, and one of the best interviews he said, he's a great guy. I was a fan of his for all these years. He was kind enough to come on the show. And one of his favorite interviews was with Thierry Henry. And the thing about him is, and you kind of remind me of Thierry Henry in terms of your approach to business, because there are some bulldozers, there are players that are very aggressive. This guy, finesse,
Yes.
touch, elegance, but he got the job done. He was a
Absolutely.
beautiful. So tell me about growing up, in India. How did you go from being in school to banking? Was it something you discussed with your parents? I'm always curious about the genesis.
So, I have been very fortunate in that both my parents are double postgraduates. So they were definitely among the more educated folks at that point. We're talking the 60s, 70s, 80s, that period. So they were very clear that they wanted me to have the freedom to decide what I wanted to do. And as I said, I think whilst not being like a straight A student, always top of the class, I was never in that category. But I was always easily an above average student. So the societal pressure to conform and to basically be in that, science and engineering and, medical stream was very high. So much so, I'll tell you an incident where I was returning home from, junior college one day, and one of our neighbors was, happened to be sat next to me in the bus. And he was like, the whole journey, he was like, why are you doing this to yourself? And, if you want, I can retrace your steps and we will put you back into science and, do engineering. And that was how much the pressure was. And people sort of, thought I was crazy, trying to take a slightly different path. And somewhere I think that rebellious streak in me to sort of show that I can do it differently.
Yeah.
But also the liking. As I keep saying, unless you have passion for something, it isn't going to work out for you. And very early on, although, when you're 14, 15, 16, you don't really know too much about different industries and what opportunities exist, etc. I knew that I liked maths more than science.
Yeah.
And I knew that I liked the world of numbers more than, I like the world of, say, physics or chemistry or what have you. And so that basically was a heartfelt decision to move into commerce and accounting, and I literally never had to look back. There was not a day when I felt that I had taken a wrong decision. And so just one thing led to the other. I will also tell you that growing up, although financial services was my dream industry, my dream job wasn't banking. It was probably being a credit analyst and working in a credit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was. But then as you grow older, you get exposed to a lot of things. To me, one of the defining moments was getting into one of the top business schools in India. I got suddenly exposed to people from all over the country, and that was a massive learning experience for me, and that kind of influenced my thought process quite a bit, and so stepped into banking right after, and stayed there.
Did you have friends at uni that wanted to go into banking? Is that how that conversation ensued, or?
It wasn't that people were wanting to go into banking. It was that people wanted to be in the world of finance, in the world of financial services, whether it was banking, could be traditional banking, could be investment banking, could be equity research. When I started working in the industry, it was only a very few years that India had started liberalizing. And so the opportunity set was beginning to expand. And financial services was exploding. So it was a really good time to be in financial services.
Well, the first organization you worked for, it has been, reputed to be the best training ground, arguably in the world, right? And I always believe if you work for this type of company, you don't just survive, but you flourish. You learn how to navigate, politics.
Yes.
How you do stints in different functions. What are some of your key takeaways in your first 5 years?
So I think I will admit that, looking back, while it was a very good time, as I said, it was very exciting. There was a massive amount of change going on in the country. So at a very young age, you got exposed to, I was speaking with the senior most folks in the regulatory organizations, in the stock exchanges. We had all these investors coming in and talking to us from outside, going and presenting to clients in the US and other parts of the world. I think that all influenced me a little bit too much, I would say. And perhaps, if I will, the lesson I learned is that, you are, the need for humility wasn't quite there at the point to me, because everything was going well, and everything was going in a very high momentum, high performance kind of area. So that was the few years that I spent in India. It was really high octane.
Yeah.
But when I moved to Australia, it was like a startup organization. I was starting up the business, and suddenly, without having the big brand behind you, when you called somebody, it had to be all you, right? It had to be you and what you are, rather than what the brand you work for. And that is what taught me a lesson in humility.
I think that's a very important lesson, because the thing is, most people, when you meet, I actually did a LinkedIn post about this the other day. Some of the best leaders that I've worked with at the C level, they are actually very humble, because they've seen peaks and troughs. They've been posted abroad like you were, and then you realize, okay, now I'm in a real driving seat.
Yes.
You've got to get on your knees, put the plug in. It's a bit different.
Absolutely. I'll tell you again one very interesting story. Early in my stint in Sydney, I probably called a couple of people and trying, obviously, to get a meeting with them, selling my ware, pitching my story. And the lady, their gatekeeper, was very nice the first time. The second time, the third time, she literally said, "Don't call us, we'll call you." and to me, that was such a shock, because coming from where I did, where I used to be always, sort of top of the range or close by, you'd worked for a large, well-known organization. Whenever you called somebody, you always got, the doors always automatically opened.
Yeah.
And here I was, somebody telling me, don't call me, I will call you.
How did you deal with it?
It was a shock, I must say.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, started making me feel like, I have to, I attended a few of these self-help classes, and the need to step up my own self-confidence was very high. It was a low ebb, I must admit.
How old were you at the time, roughly? Late 20s?
Maybe, yeah, 26, 27, that kind of stuff, right? So it was tough. It was a bitter pill to swallow, I must admit. But it was a learning ground, right? I think then how do you network behind, or how do you circumvent that, right? So one interesting thing I picked up was I found that if you wanted to reach somebody in the C-suite, as a young 27-year-old sales guy,
Yeah.
and you wanted to speak to the chief information officer at one of the large banks, a lot of their assistants who were gatekeepers, like this lady was, they used to always come normal time, 8, 8:30, 9, whatever, right?
I love where you're going with this. Yeah.
The senior CIOs were always in office 7. So I learned that I have to adjust my time, and I used to be in office 6:30 and practicing my pitch, and sometimes that worked, and that got me a few meetings. And so sometimes it is not always about getting deal and getting revenue. It's about an individual activity, and if you feel successful about it,
Yeah.
it just adds to your confidence, adds to your positive mindset, and it helps cascade through the whole day.
I love that. And I love, because a lot of people will listen to you and not realize what you had to do, the things like this. I'll take it this far. I will actually, people will say to me, oh, it's funny, I'm bumping into you. It's like serendipity. Well, but, sometimes I'm having coffee downstairs at the bottom of the building early because my goal, or I'll find out, okay, the person's in Hong Kong, they're staying at Mandarin Oriental.
Yes.
I'm not going to call the hotel, but you have to know where they are. And
Yes.
let's unpack that, by the way, because a lot of senior people have done what you've done, but people are unaware of it. So some of the self-help courses, were they in Sydney or were they
Yes,
international?
there was actually a US-based person, I forget the name, I think Brian Rogers it is,
Okay.
who came down and did some webinars. And again, now it may all seem very silly, but I remember there was 2 or 3 things he said to me, which I used to actually follow, right? He those days were cassettes.
Yeah.
So, so you plug them into the car when you're driving to work.
Yeah.
And he said to all of us, it was a big crowd of people, and he said to all of us that as a salesperson, you to engender that positivity in you every day, you must start your day, kind of very strongly saying to yourself, right? I like myself. I love this world. I like myself. I love this world. And a couple of other such things, right? And believe me, all these years later, when I'm under stress
Yeah.
and I don't know what to do, I still remember that.
Yeah.
And I still sort of, mentally,
It's very
I love
powerful.
my job. I love my job. I love my job.
Yeah.
I like myself. I used to do that for a long, long time after.
Thanks for sharing that.
Helped me
Yeah.
a lot.
A lot of people don't do it. So in my company, I've created an action planner, which is, a breakdown of your day, and it's very structured. But at the top of it, I write I am ... and then I want every person to write down what they're thinking or what they're feeling that day.
Yeah.
And then you see, the thing that have learned is to become world class in anything, you really have to go deep. Because I've traveled around the world, I've attended conferences, and the more I know I don't know. That's the one thing that's become a reality.
Yeah.
But so I say to my guys in the morning, why we're at our desk at the latest at 8:30 in the morning, because they're typically, when you're calling candidates, there's 3 times you can speak to them: before work, lunchtime,
Yes.
after work.
Correct.
And the great thing about before work is everyone's in a rush, so it's a condensed conversation. So I always try and say, if you can have 3 calls, and ideally 3 planned calls, 1 warm, 1 follow-up, 1 cold. Try not to have the cold call first, because if the guy blows you out and destroys you,
Yeah.
your day's ruined.
Correct.
More often than not, right? But the funny thing is, I always say to people about sales, people ask me, well, how do you get through? And, even on the podcast, when I reach out to people I don't know, if someone doesn't reply to me, I don't think it's a no, because I don't even know if they got the message.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I always, and one of the things that's very powerful, as is if you invite someone for a coffee or a chat, and you do it without really a massive agenda, I think it's quite powerful.
It is, absolutely. And I will tell you another incident recently that happened where I did it and it just helped me. But going back, You know what this guy was trying to tell us? I think his name is Brian Rogers. What he was trying to tell us is, typically in a sales role or any frontline role with the pressure that you always have, a lot of it is self-imposed, because if you're not getting the deals, or if you are in industries where the gestation period is very long, what tends to happen is that the negativity just feeds on itself.
Yeah.
And what he was trying to tell us is, look, the reason you got to do this very strongly is because you want to trick your mind into believing that things are going well.
Yeah.
And once you do that successfully, then the mind will always look at the positive side. So if you're faced in a tough conversation and you approach that conversation from a very negative mindset, oh, things are not working for me, the reaction you have to the other person is going to be very different from if you're approaching it, confident, like I can do this kind of a
Massive
approach.
difference.
Yeah. So that I think really helps.
Yeah.
But as I was telling you, exactly like you said, recently I had a lunch with a very respected prospect client. It wasn't for any purpose. It was just, because I loved chatting with this person.
Yeah.
And at the end of the conversation, they asked me saying, what do you need? And I said, no, nothing. I just wanted to have a chat because
That's
I
very
love chatting with
powerful.
you. And the person proactively then did 3 things that have really helped me.
Yeah.
So sometimes it just ends up working in very, unforeseen ways.
I love it. I love that whole approach. One of the things I wanted to share with you that you're a sportsman, you get it. But I'll give an example. So my son was on the Singapore national boxing team.
Wow.
And the guys were running laps, and he's inherited my lack of stamina. I was a sprinter. So he got lapped by some of the guys, and he kind of gave up towards the end. This is when he first got on the team. And afterwards, they were doing push-ups, and he was a bit better at the push-ups. And I was watching them, and afterwards I went for a walk. I said, listen, let me share something with you. Every single day that you turn up and you do this, I want you to time it, and I want you to beat your personal best. That's your personal world record.
Yeah.
Right? And, right at the end, they could be a whole lap ahead of you, but let me tell you, you're coming. Keep going, keep pushing. And it was funny because they were doing push-ups, and I said to him, I was quite firm. I said, son, you can do a lot more than that. And at the time, I think I was like 45, and I could still do more push-ups than anyone on that team. And I was 45, and I had injuries. And I said, I'm telling you, you can do more. You just got to inch your way towards it. Because what I find is self-respect is the most important type of respect. Yeah. If you don't feel good about yourself.
Yes.
And I always said to my children or my colleagues, listen, you may not, whatever the revenue is going to be, is going to be. Yeah. Your grades are going to be what they're going to be.
Yes.
But I need to know you put 100% in. You gave it your very best. And that's all we can ask of ourselves.
Absolutely.
I
totally agree with that thought process. Yeah.
I love that. So one of the things, my observation of you, obviously I've not seen you on the floor, is you're so engaging. Talk to me about how important it is to be engaging in our business, in private banking, to walk the floor, to speak with people.
I think there's 2 or 3 aspects that I find very intriguing. One being that, when I first started sort of working, even before that, when I, observed others around me, there was a feeling that, being very hard-nosed and very much driven by outcomes was the way to go. Somehow I picked that up as a trait. And then I realized that also early on in my sort of career, people tend to have likes and dislikes. Right? There are friends and there are people you don't like and you stay away from, and so on and so forth. And over time, it's sort of very naturally a change occurred in me. And the change was that I started to sort of balance the need for outcomes with the need for engagement and the need for what I would call people orientation. And equally so, I started figuring out that instead of looking at everyone as a 0-1 variable, you like or you don't like, good or not good, I started to figure out how to look at the good in every person and avoid the bad in every person. And so it sort of became expanded my horizons quite a lot. And I've always been like the hands-on kind of a guy. Everyone's always described me like that. That's been something it's come naturally to me. I didn't have to work too hard for it. And so that helps. And I will also tell you, the one thing that is massively benefited me is from initial years in my career where most of my jobs were frontline facing, like I talked about this, cold calling and sales.
Yeah.
From that type of a role, I was suddenly thrust into managing an operations team.
Mm.
And it just opened my eyes to this whole world of nitty gritty and the whole world of so many small details that are needed to
Yeah.
sort of, fit together. That was without a doubt one of the best stints I had, because today, any conversation anywhere in the world, whether it's with clients, whether it's with people, people in my team, people outside, my colleagues, the the grounding I got from that stint
Huge.
makes me massively confident in unpeeling every problem, at least in our industry.
Yeah.
And even within that context, I would say what helped me was a lot of people in operations tend to be very hugely focused on detail and very hugely focused on their individual silos. That's how they're trained. So, over time, that just becomes muscle memory. Whereas because I had come into the operations setup, from a more frontline perspective, I used to always try to understand what the whole ecosystem is, what the product guy is doing, what the sales guy is doing, what the client wants or doesn't want, and then therefore what happens in the back office. That has helped me, I think, quite a lot to, stay and survive and
Of
and do well in
course.
that industry.
Of course. When you think about lasting impact, what, have you learned from any of your mentors or key experiences that you could take away and share with us?
So look, I would say that fortunately, there is no one single experience or one single person that I would say has been, a big influence. I've been very, very lucky. Whether it was my stints in India, I had fantastic managers and fantastic bosses and really talented colleagues. So it was not always that you learned from your, your bosses and your managers. You also learned from your colleagues quite a lot.
100%.
In Australia, again, I was very fortunate, although I was the only person from my company, because it was a startup type of an organization. Very fortunate in having built some really good, powerful relationships with clients and prospects there. To date, they're sort of, they've lasted well. So from a learning perspective, massive doses of learning, even those two areas. And then Singapore obviously has been it's a totally different level altogether. One of the things that has happened in my case is, although I've spent a long time working for one organization, it has not been in one job.
Yes.
It has basically been in 6 different jobs. And so with each of those 6 jobs, some of your stakeholders are common, but quite a few of your stakeholders are different. And then being able to do a regional job, working with countries all the way from Australia to Russia and Poland, and global jobs is where US comes in, etc. It gave me the opportunity to build both a personal and professional network across the world. And one of the most gratifying things for me out of the time I've spent is I don't think there are too many people who can pick up the call, speak to somebody in Russia with the same affinity as somebody in the US or somebody in Australia or somebody in Korea or any other part of the world. So that, I think, has been one of the biggest successes for me in my career.
That's amazing. I mean, you've seen a lot of huge scale up and growth. What are some of your takeaways on transformation that you've observed?
Well, if you talk about our industry, I would say that there have been wealth management as a whole industry. There have been a few very structural trends or factors. Right? I would say 4 or 5 things really stick out in my head. The number one thing is that I remember in the early 2000s, when we used to compare Asia with, let's say, the US or UK or Australia or, the English-speaking developed world, the one big difference between, say, the US, which is still the largest wealth management, sort of hub, versus Asia, is in Asia, everything was bank-led. Whereas in the US, it was definitely not the case. That disintermediation, which we all thought will come in the form of registered investment advisors or independent financial advisors, has started happening, I think, in the last 5 to 7 years in a in a very strong way, and it's taken the form of family offices, multifamily offices, external or independent asset managers. So essentially, they are intermediating between banks and investors or clients. So that's been a very strongly observed trend. I would say regulation has been a very big factor. So after the global financial crisis, the focus was all on making sure that you're not mis-selling, that suitability, risk appetite, time horizon, da 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 da. Today it's talking about KYC, AML. How do you onboard clients? How do you make sure you're not sort of facilitating any sort of illegal or wrongful activity. So regulation in a sense has been very, very influential. I'd also say that what's happening with us here in Asia is that technology has been a massive force for change. So whereas a decade ago we talked about things like data, then digital, now we talk about AI. These are all different terms, but in general I would bracket them as technology is resetting expectations. It is resetting behavioral traits as well across the board. So alongside disintermediation and regulations, I think technology is one of the big driving factors. I'd also say I'll squeeze in a couple of things. One, that I don't know whether it is just me feeling like this because my experiences and my sort of jobs have changed. But when I entered the industry, it almost seemed like private banking and wealth was all about providing the best investment idea, the best investment product, and the inaccessible investment product in front of clients.
It's changed, right?
It's but much broader now: estate planning, trusts, legacy, art, collectibles, different types of. So looking at the holistic needs of clients has probably become more important. And then I think the last point I'd say is, in Asia, most of the wealth has been first generation.
Yeah.
Whereas, let's say in the US or Europe, it's not necessarily been the case.
Yes.
So that transformation is about to take place in Asia.
Yeah.
From a sort of pass through of wealth, and other than just dealing with the next gen in the shape and form that most private banks here do, we haven't really yet solved that problem of how do you deal with the new generation, which has a very different set of goals and objectives and so on and so forth.
It's all happening now. But I feel like the regulatory side of things become silly. This happened literally yesterday in the last 2 days. So I've got an account with a major bank, and I got a text message saying that your accounts have been frozen because of lack of documentation, and what is a source of wealth. And I was asked for things, I provided them, and they're saying, well, we don't understand how you bought and afforded a property in the US this many years ago. And anyway, it's a real pain in the backside, because what annoyed me is no one called me, no one spoke to me. They've done this. And actually, when I was flying back from Sydney, I didn't realize my credit card had been frozen
as well.
And I didn't realize. And listen, I provided them everything yesterday, but I'm going to close the account now because the way that it wasn't handled well, right? And listen, the irony is, if I was $100 million Chinese client bringing my money, and maybe they would still be doing business with me, right? But it was, that to me is just, it's ridiculous. And by the way, that particular, I said to the banker, the irony is this particular account, I've been with you guys for 30 years. You can see how much I've been putting into the bank for 30 years. So you've got some myopic person in a back office. They're doing their job. They're looking at this one thing in a binary fashion. And by the way, you forgot I'm a business owner. So it's not just my notice of assessment, it's my dividends, right? But it was shocking to me that they can do that, just like that.
Yeah.
It's happening a lot though now, right?
It is. I'll tell you, very funny. One of my bosses, she says, common sense is not very common.
Yeah. I love that.
Totally,
I love that. Spot on.
I totally, so I so dig that comment, and I always laugh whenever, that comment comes up. Because what tends to happen, I think, is that, whenever you face a very big issue, we had some in our country, a little bit of, not such nice incidences and money laundering and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Whenever you have issues like that, the pendulum tends to swing the other side.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's probably why we are facing more of these types of anecdotes.
Yeah.
Somebody the other day told me that they run a family office and their bank asked them, why did they pay, X dollars to Bloomberg? So, so I think some of that, it does.
It's what I couldn't get my head around was they asked for the last 2 years of notice of assessment. This property was bought 9 years ago. They said, we don't understand how you could afford it. I said, well, normally when people buy a property, it's not from 1 or 2 years of earning. It's been accumulated over many, many years.
Yes.
Fortunately, I have good accountants that had it on hand, but it's just what a pain. I'm curious, when you look back at your career, what were the milestone turning points that you feel like moving to Sydney, for example, that shaped your career?
It was actually, I think the significant turning point was probably my move to Australia and my decision to sort of follow my wife there because she used to work in India and then she got a transfer to Australia, and I didn't really have a job at the start of it. But then this startup came along and, then things kind of worked up. But that was probably a milestone, a big. I think if I had not done that, things may have gone into a very different direction. But again, no regrets. It was a fabulous experience, and the risk that I took. It also taught me because I used to be fairly conservative, risk averse type of a mindset. Still is, but it did teach me that there is value in taking calculated risks, and they work out.
100%. Yeah. It's very interesting because more often than not, most people I know move up within their current organization or externally because they've got a phone call or a tap on the shoulder. And I always say, look, whilst that's great, I always say you should be trying to work backwards from where you want to be 10 years from now.
Yes.
And be making moves, be it internally or externally, that is going to take you in that direction. The thing that I always struggle with is, and you know this, most young and up-and-coming professionals always talk to me about money and rank. And I always say to them, you're asking the wrong question. You should be thinking about influence, visibility, making an impact, because money and title is going to come. It's inevitable.
Totally agree.
Right? But if you're pushing the cart before the horse, and that...
Totally agree with
a lot of people don't see that, right, in the moment. Maybe they will do later on in their career, I'm sure.
Yes.
When you think about what is central to the business and people management, what have you learned? What are some of the takeaways you've got?
So as I said, I started my career probably being a very hard-nosed taskmaster. And
I can't imagine that, by the way. But in your younger years, right?
Very brash and not very, I would say, not very nice to work with. But over time, as life taught me different lessons, I think more humility crept in. But more importantly, I think I started to see the difference in the different style. If you sort of have two styles, right, a very outcome-oriented style and a very people-oriented style, I saw both people. And sometimes the people-oriented style also didn't work, because if you just, hedged your bets always on a person or two and said, this is my team, that's not my team, I don't think that also necessarily works. And so my effort has been to sort of be in the middle path and try and get the best of both worlds. You can't lose outcome orientation. Outcomes are super important in commercial organizations.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think being able to work with a wide variety of people is super important. And I've seen a lot of people not being able to do that. And bright people, intellectually very sound, but just the lack of ability to work with a wide variety of people sometimes pulls them down.
Can you speak on that? Because you could be referring to multicultural, different parts of the business, different levels of seniority. What have you learned in your career? Because you've worked with everyone, right, globally, at varying levels, different pockets of the bank.
Yes, indeed. I think, look, what I found is that whether I was speaking to somebody senior in the US or whether I was speaking to, let's say a junior analyst in Korea, being yourself is important. Trying to change too much and, be a different person from who you are doesn't pay. I tried it and it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
What worked for me is just being myself, right? So
be authentic. What
that means is that you are definitely going to have to also present your weaknesses as much as your strengths.
Yeah.
And on the periphery, you do refine yourself. For example, certain cultures, face saving is very important. Initially, I didn't quite pick that up. And then once I picked it up, I started realizing that sometimes it is not really useful to sort of name and shame people more publicly. But in other cases, having a leaderboard and saying, look, out of these 10 countries, these two are going very well
Yeah.
and the other two are not, sometimes spurs competition and, helps sort of everyone do that much better. So I would say that being authentic, being yourself is very important. The second thing that I would say is that in each of these conversations, I found that where I wasn't able to relay my own passion for something, I've never been successful. And alternatively, where I have been able to relay my passion, somehow there is a little bit of a contagious sort of experience where the other person gets it.
Yeah.
And then they are even more committed to help you achieve what you want to achieve than not.
That's great advice. I always speak, because when I speak to a lot of people and they're thinking about their career decision, they're being led by the smell of money sometimes.
Yeah.
So I say the best way to make your decision is, if money was equal, what are you going to enjoy more? Which is the area where you're going to make most impact,
Yes.
right? And that's easy to say, but sometimes it's difficult to make that decision. And I think if you're not being authentic, quite often you're trying to deliver someone else's agenda.
Yes.
And we've all been there, right? But that's not easy. It's compromising.
It is. It compromises. Also, one of my mentors, I have had several. I think once we were having a conversation about vertical growth and horizontal growth,
Yes.
and many people don't understand that. But
Can you explain the difference for those that may not really understand the nuanced difference?
yeah, sure. So take any organization. There is only one CEO. There are not 50 CEOs.
Yeah.
There's only those 3 or 4 or 5 people who are part of the executive team. And so it's a pyramid. And by definition, not everyone is going to go to the top. So in that context, how do you keep growing personally and how do you keep growing professionally is an important question for everyone to ask. And like you said, most people, especially when they're in the early stages, are looking for, how do I get more money? How do I get more of a bonus or a salary? How do I sort of grow? How do I get the next title? How do I get the next promotion? That's always the way we are modeled to think. And what I found was that, it took me a long time to grow from a, director level person to a managing director level person. But in that interim, I found that my life was so rich because the type of different jobs that I did
Yeah.
never made me feel empty or never made me feel like I was not doing something, not doing well or not enjoying myself. They were radically different jobs, understanding how the bank's balance sheet works and then, being able to talk to a fund manager and evaluate whether they are doing the right thing, being an investment side. These are all very, very different. The nature of the jobs are very, very different.
Yeah.
And so in my case, what happened, and again, I was very fortunate in having a lot of good advice, as I said, but enjoying horizontal growth, meaning even if you've not sort of got the next promotion or the next grade, taking the risk in doing different types of jobs,
Yeah.
it enriches you considerably and doesn't sort of, it allows you that longevity in the industry.
It really does. Last night I had a drink with a friend of mine who's a global market head and who wants to take on more responsibility, which will hopefully take that person to a senior head role. And what we agreed was, and I had suggested, is that, if he takes on more in terms of platform, understanding things like the operational side of things, that's that horizontal growth. You're not really creating a threat. You're demonstrating the desire to learn more, and that underpins that next step. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
No, it's big.
It also places you very well because your own understanding of the environment improves significantly. As opposed to if, for 20 years, I was always a fixed income analyst or a fund analyst.
Yeah.
It just starts to kind of corral your thinking into a lane.
Yes.
And you find it more and more difficult to cross lanes and, move from one to the other.
Yeah.
So
there's a big learning lesson from that.
Absolutely.
When you think about high performance sales teams, What can you share with us that you've learned about driving those, inspiring those guys, managing people?
So I think the two things that I will say, right? One is people who are focused on generating the right outcomes for their clients. I've seen them to be definitely way more successful than those that are trying to generate outcomes only for themselves. The second thing I've learned is that, oftentimes neither problems are unique nor are solutions unique. But how a salesperson expresses the solution often determines whether they are successful or not.
Yeah.
And two people can talk about the same solution in radically different ways.
Yes.
And if you connect with the client at a level that they are able to understand and express the solution in a way that create steps on their hot buttons, you're always going to
that human connection is huge.
Absolutely.
It's everything. When you've thought about changing from one dimension of a job to another, and you know that it's actually quite a significant change, and if it doesn't go well, you could fall on your face.
Yes.
What is the thought process, the due diligence, the SWOT analysis that you're doing, and how much of it is gut instinct versus rational deductive logic?
I think, look, one of the early learnings I had, and I will specifically relate what led to me concluding that. Right, when I went into this business school, you had the country's best people at the business school, right? Certainly the cream of the lot. And the first term, I was really scared because everyone scared me, saying, these guys are sharp geniuses, and you're like, what are you? So I kind of worked my backside off, only focused on work the whole term. And I found that I was in, the top 10% of the cohort. Not the top, but the top 10%.
Yeah.
It made me realize that however hard I work, I'm not likely to be
Correct.
the person, who's going to top the class. And then suddenly I realized, things are not so bad. So the next couple of terms, I kind of took it easy, enjoyed myself a little bit more, and, bunked a few classes, not really paid attention.
That's a term back in India as well, bunked.
It is, yes. Indeed. And I fell, obviously the grades fell, and I sort of fell down the pecking order. But I went to maybe the top 25%, the top 30%, something around that, right? And that made me realize that, however hard I work and however well I do, there's going to be 10 people in front of me.
Yeah.
And however poorly I do, there's going to be 10 people behind me.
Yeah.
So I kind of got a good sense of where my sort of, natural place would tend to be. And that, has kind of carried me through the whole, journey afterwards as well. So that's probably how I would sort of put it.
One of the things that I've observed, I want to ask you about upskilling and creating more development for you personally and for your teams.
Yeah.
Is this. So I'll give you an example. Whenever I did martial arts,
Yes.
Or any sport, I was the only person. In fact, I've never seen anyone else doing it real time. I had a notepad and a pen. So I would do something and I would do it well, or I did it badly. More often than not, it's the wonderful thing about martial arts that's very humbling. You get your backside kicked daily.
Yes.
Just it's either you're tired, or they're bringing new people in, or it's techniques. You're forever a white belt on learning. And I would sit down and I would pen things down. This is before you could record it easily,
Yes.
right? And then analyze it. And the one thing that I always disagreed with my first coaches for about 15 years was, when you're learning katas, you're learning setting moves, there's a traditional way of doing things. And I always said, well, what are we doing? Is this a dance? Are we trying to take over the opponent? And if it's the latter, you're trying to do something that's unconventional, that they can't read. And in business, I find with investments as well, typically you have to do things in the opposite direction that the herd is going in.
Yes.
What have you learned about upskilling, right, for yourself and your teams?
So I think continuous learning is a very important part of our industry. In my case, after my MBA and a little bit of an accounting sort of a background that I have, when I entered the wealth management industry in the early 2000s, very soon I realized in order for me to do well in the industry, I need to upskill. So during the time of the global financial crisis, 2007, 8, etc., I sort of used that time to upskill myself. I studied and did the CFA exams and
Yeah.
got that degree. Then the alternative investment analyst thing came in, so CAIA. And in general, in our industry, what I don't like is that there is a little bit of checklisting that goes on. Right?
Yes.
So as a CFA, every year I have to say I've done so much, continual professional development. As a licensed representative in Singapore, I have to do the same. And many people then, just to fill that slot, do something or the other, which is a part of the industry I don't quite like or enjoy that much. But what I do find is that thankfully I'm very passionate about investments, about learning, and always very curious. So over time, I have ended up liking or kind of being affiliated with a few industry experts,
Yeah.
and I'm always consuming the information they're sending through. And it's a very motley crowd. There's a hedge fund manager sitting in Johannesburg in South Africa. There is a few people who do podcasts in the US. There is a professor called Professor Damodaran who teaches at NYU. So people like that. There's a Italian hedge fund manager who's recently started. There's a whole bunch of different people that over time I've begun to sort of like and appreciate the insight that they bring in. So I'm always at it. There's no break for me.
Yeah.
So
That's we're very fortunate to live in a time where we have easy access.
Correct.
You know what I mean? If anything, it's overwhelming because there's so much. Talk to me a little bit about personal mindset, and habits that you've built into your career to help the momentum. Because what I think differentiates people at the top is when you meet someone like yourself, 3 decades into the business, you've still got the energy and passion that you probably had 20 years ago and all the time that I've known you. But, what goes behind that personal mindset?
I think the 2-3 things that have, been something that I feel, by my experience when I see successful people as well, I think the desire to do a good job is absolutely not negotiable.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, whichever profession you're in, whichever industry you're in, the desire to be the best, or the desire to do that much better has to be self-generated.
Yes.
People who are very happy to do things as a 9 to 5 are unlikely to, kind of over time progress beyond, a certain level, because, and it could take, the desire and the self-initiation could take different forms. You could study things on your own, or you could just experiment with, slightly different profession, or you could do a new profession on the side. I've known a lot of people who have been bankers and, but who wanted to be restaurateurs, or you wanted to be chefs, and they do things on the side, and, after a while they've moved on.
Yes.
So if life didn't always throw, cards at you in the right way, you after a while will always get the opportunity to, to sort of live your passion.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, I think to me, the desire to do well has been absolutely.
It's got to be at the forefront.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
that whole customer service and experience
Yes.
and delivering is that simple. What advice would you give to young professionals? We've got kids that are thinking of going into the banking industry today. What would you share with them?
I think whenever young people approach me, I always tell them that, particularly with investments, it's applicable in every other role as well, but particularly in investments, I don't think, many other professions can be a 9 to 5 type of a profession. But increasingly, with a super hyper connected world,
Yeah.
increasingly with information available so easily to everybody, the investments profession, the wealth profession is not something that you can take a break from. You have to learn to mentally de-stress, yes, but it's not like, okay, the last 2 weeks of the year, I'm on holiday, I'll forget about it.
No,
Markets are still going to be there.
100%.
Things could change radically in the time that you're away.
Money never sleeps.
It doesn't sleep, right? And so I think the passion to want to be doing that
Yeah.
is important. And I think many young people sometimes, I keep hearing of different comments from them. Interestingly, there was one guy many, many years ago who told me that he wanted to work in a particular office building.
Okay.
And there was one Raffles Key.
Okay.
The time when one Raffles Key was the newest building in town.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to work there. It was like the hotbed of private banking.
Correct.
So this guy said he wants to work there. I won't name which bank he went for, but he was working in a back office structure. And I said to him, look, I can very easily envisage that every bank starting to move their back office team somewhere else, whether it's Changi, whether it's,
Alexandra Park or whatever. Yeah.
So what would you do? You're leaving us to go there.
Yeah.
What would you do if they did the same thing?
Yeah.
And his answer really, made me laugh. He said, then I'll look for some other bank who still is there.
That is hilarious.
It was hilarious, absolutely. And you know what? 6 months later, he came back. So young people sometimes tend to get swayed by, I would say, wrong things.
Yeah.
But as long as you really like doing what you do,
Yeah.
you are going to definitely find it successful. The other thing that I sort of feel is that when I entered the industry, there was a premium on people who were good with numbers, good with analysis, good, getting things done was their strength. Now, I think overwhelmingly being able to work with people is the biggest strength. You have to train yourself to work with people of all sorts.
It's paramount.
Absolutely. And that also, I think, because of globalization, people like, if you take Singapore,
Yeah.
it's no longer a unidimensional place. There's so many different cultures melting here into a pot. You go to Dubai, it's the same thing. You go to Hong Kong, it's the same thing. You go to any parts of the world, it's really the same thing. And so being able to work with that wide variety of people is critical. And the third thing I would say to all young people is you have to mix technology with the human interface. Both of them are complementary. It's not one or the other.
Yes.
And so
It's
that
hand
is
in
going
hand.
to drive the future.
What's interesting is I had a conversation quite recently with someone in New York who said to me, in North America, this is how we do it. This is what we expect. And, the one thing, firstly, in Singapore now, we tend to work, especially in your previous organization, what we do is global.
Yes.
And you're dealing with all different currencies and all different cultures. And what I've realized is excellent wherever. Right.
Yes.
And when he said that at first, in the old days, I probably would have been very offended, but I realized perhaps he's got, his experience is primarily that. Right. But when you work in different places, you realize, we're all a bridge to a new destination and how you handle that. But I do find it interesting because I'll give an example. What I love about the US is that everyone there is trying to win. Mm-hmm. And it is accepted and it is appreciated. In the UK, when I grew up in the UK, if you're a winner, you're going to be torn down. So I remember we had a sports day once and there was a rule that you could only participate in either 2 track events and 1 field event or 2 field and 1 track and the relay. And because, being the young braggadocious guy that I was, been a very good athlete, I participated in a couple of too many events.
I see.
And I got reprimanded. And then so I was doing something called the Duke of Edinburgh Awards thing, which was quite prestigious in England. And they take your best times and they took away my best times.
Because you did more events.
Yeah, and I did one too many events. Yeah. And there's another boy who was really useless, participated in all the events, not just one too many, came last, and they gave him a special award. And so what I found is that very different. And one thing, you'll get this, I learned this in Singapore. When I first moved, it's a bit different now. In 2001, it took me 7 years to learn this. Yes, yes, yes is often no. It's like, whereas in Hong Kong, it's no, they kick you out of the office kind of thing. So what I've learned is how do you fast forward conversations, and each location is a bit different, right?
It is, yes. Very, very interesting.
How do you balance the difference between ambition and contentment? Because I find a lot of people get stuck between that.
To me, I think I would say, and some may kind of find this too sort of out of left field, but I've had to be schizophrenic.
Explain what you mean by that.
So which means that, every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year, I'm not going to be at the top of my game.
Yeah.
And so when others are doing better than me, for whatever reason, they inherently are doing better, the environment is working in their favor, whatever it is, right? I have to learn to be content in order for me to sort of, live to fight the battle another day.
Yeah.
And if I sort of start to get in negative emotion at the time when I'm not doing well,
Yes.
then it's all going to go downhill. And I'm going to get into a situation where, the growth will start to sort of stop, if you will. So there are times when you have to say, okay, let's be content.
Yeah.
It could be because of the way your life is going at that point in time. And it's happened to me as several times that, there were certain specific times when I really didn't want to be like growing too fast and, taking on too much responsibility because of the personal circumstances I had.
Yes.
But at the same time, there are times when you need to sort of say, I've got to go get it. I've got to get the next grade. I've got to get the next promotion. I've got to do better. I've got to do, whether for yourself, your family, or, whatever it is. So you have to be able to have that ambition in order to drive you for the future.
Yeah.
If you don't have any ambition at all, then it is very difficult to sustain. But at the same time, you have to balance that, like you said. But you have to basically put two hats, and that's why I say be a schizophrenic.
Yeah.
There are some times when you should put that contentment hat on, and other times when you basically just say, let's go get it.
Yeah, because I see a lot of people that I call them itchy backside, right? They are so busy trying to climb the totem pole. And I've always said, look, to do really well in business, in the corporate world, it tremendously helps if you have a godfather or godmother.
Yes.
You need multiple champions.
Yes.
And if you keep moving, you're not going to have that. And I think it's overlooked, but loyalty and longevity, it's overlooked. And the reason why I think it's overlooked is this, and it's look, you worked in your previous organization for such a long time.
Yes.
It's not their fault, but most CEOs today, they're up for re-election every year.
Yes.
They're being measured quarterly.
Yes.
So unfortunately, most CEOs in the job today, they won't be in the job five years from now. Yeah. But I mean, do you think loyalty is overlooked in most large corporates?
I think that what has tended to happen over time is that most large organizations, especially if they are not doing too well,
yeah,
there is a tendency to feel that your existing talent isn't good enough.
Yeah.
And something outside is always going to be better. And so that's where the aspect of loyalty tends to get overlooked a little bit, because you always want to bring in new blood, new talent to benchmark yourself to what's happening in the market. But that's a hallmark of an organization that is inherently not doing well itself. Because, and for a long time, my previous organization used to be setting the benchmark.
Yes.
And it used to be the organization that did the first ever of this and the first ever of that. And in every field within banking, financial services, they were sort of at the forefront.
Yes.
And when that stopped happening somewhere, I think in that journey, I think that's when the need to bring in fresh talent starts to, overpower the need to generate or nurture your own.
Yeah. Because I think about this, when you've seen senior people move, they tend to bring a lot of people with them. And, I think if there's too much nepotism, again, it's got to be balanced. And then you have other organizations that are so insular, they're not looking outside, then how do you truly improve? And I find it so interesting because, you see, when I look at a lot of corporations, you'll have a regional CEO, you'll have a Singapore CEO and a Hong Kong CEO, and the regional CEO wants these guys to fight it out. Or a lot of banks believe in co-heads because you create competition. If one bugger leaves, you've got another person in place.
Yes.
And it's very clever, it's very strategic, but I've always believed, and I always say this, that a rising tide raises all ships. And the reality is the competition shouldn't be internal. It's against the market, it's against the other organizations. Yes. But when you speak to most companies, when I talk to senior people, they're more often talking about the fight to stay and survive in their current organization than against the street, which I find fascinating. It's sad. Yeah. It's crazy, right? It just doesn't make sense.
Especially if you think about, you think about what's happening in the wealth industry, for example, right?
Yeah.
Very big picture. Wealth is growing at the fastest clip that we've seen in years, in decades.
Yes.
the talent to help manage that wealth is not growing at the same clip. So theoretically, everyone who is in the industry should be able to grow and should be able to benefit from the fact that there is a larger supply demand gap. But somehow, to the point that you raised, I think organizations sort of sometimes sort of find themselves in a way that 2 plus 2 equal to 5 factor doesn't come in.
Yeah. How do you define success in our space right now? What does winning look like?
I think to me, somebody asked me this question at an interview in my own organization once, and this person was very senior, he was from our office in, I think, Mexico. And he asked me, saying, what would be success for you? And at the time, it honestly stumped me because I had not thought too much about it. But as I look back, to me, I think outside of rank, title, achievements on the business front, all of that is actually secondary. It makes you feel good for some time.
Yeah.
But when I move away from the industry, when I retire from the industry, those people whose lives I've touched, either because they were clients or they were colleagues or they were people working for me, if they look back on the conversations with a positive memory,
I love
if they
that.
looked at, if they kind of say, this was a good conversation, we liked working with this guy, that is success.
I love that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm going to do some rapid fire questions. I'm just curious. On your personal side, what book or film that you can remember deeply impacted you?
Always the last one. Right now I'm reading a book called Nowhere Boy.
Okay.
It's about a Syrian refugee
Okay.
in Belgium. And I'm finding the story really intriguing.
Is it a novel or?
It's a novel, yes.
Okay. Oh, good for you. Defining moment that shaped your identity.
There's no one defining moment. I would say, I think over time, little bits and pieces have made my identity.
What is your identity? When you think of yourself, banker, investor.
Yeah, as I said before, banker by profession, investor by choice.
I love it. In terms of drive, do you feel more driven by curiosity, fear, or ambition?
For sure, curiosity.
Yeah. I find the best practitioners think like that, right? They want to know more, always learning.
Yes.
What's a value or principle you never compromise on?
Honesty and integrity never to be compromised.
Yeah.
Completely non-negotiable for me.
You know, when we first met, that was very clear to me, and you were very gracious with your time. And I'll always remember that. What keeps you grounded?
As I sort of told you, I've learned the hard way that you are never as good as your best day.
Yeah.
You're never as bad as your worst day.
I love that. Great advice. How do you recharge after a long day, knowing you've been kicked in by the markets?
Just spending time with the family is a great recharge. The weekend soccer, football is a must. That is a very good way for me to de-stress.
Talking about football, I when I look at, I was not a Man U fan, but I was indirectly, we all were. And when I look at Sir Alex Ferguson, he can't really exist in business and sports today because he really was thinking about 20 years.
Yes.
He was building this youth team, and there's so many lessons to be learned from that. I heard him talk, and I read some articles. I've read all of his books when he was at Harvard, and I feel that this is missing. Do you know what I mean?
It is, and think about it because you mentioned him. People like him or Arsene Wenger, the years when they didn't win a title, you started thinking, oh, he's lost his touch.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, with Man U, for example, 10 years later, look at how much they're struggling in today's world without someone like him.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And there's a saying that we always say in the UK that form is temporary, class is permanent.
Absolutely.
And that man was a class act,
Indeed he
as was Arsene Wenger. Productivity. What's your productivity hack at work?
It's a very simple tool that whenever I'm stressed and whenever I need to get a lot of things done all at the same time, I take a piece of paper and a pen and I write down everything I have to do. And suddenly things become clear to me on what I must focus on for that moment and what I can push out for the future.
And you execute it.
Absolutely.
Do you still practice when you're pitching or going for big discussions?
I do. It's again something that one of my mentors told me. And before every important meeting, before every meeting that I want to make sure goes well, including this podcast, I did do some amount of prep work.
Because I always say to my guys, when you're going for a meeting, what is your objective of the meeting? What's your goal? What's your takeaway?
Yes.
You need to be planned and prepped. But some people, I think, especially as we get older, become complacent. And I've learned there is no place for the one wonderful thing with this podcast journey is I've got to be on my toes, right? I mean, speaking with you is easy. We're friends. We cover private banking.
That's right.
But when you're meeting someone that's new, like, you better do your research,
Absolutely,
boy. Do you know what I mean? What about a new skill? If you could master any new skill today, what would it be?
I'm very much looking forward to getting into the weeds and understanding this whole new world of AI.
Yeah.
And going beyond the hype into what it really is, what's the technology behind it, and what it could potentially impact us in future.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yes.
If you weren't in banking, what would you be doing today?
For sure, sports.
Yeah?
Something to do with sports is for sure what I
What are your favorite sports now, like to watch and to do?
I am absolutely into every kind of sport. Maybe golf,
Okay.
lower down that, but football, cricket, badminton, table tennis, you
Okay.
name it. I mean, every sport.
Who are your top 3 favorite football players of all time?
Thierry Henry is one of them for sure. I used to like a guy called Robert Pire, also a French guy.
Yes.
I liked him a lot. And Messi, of course.
Okay, I love that. Legacy, what kind of legacy do you want to leave outside of your career beyond the banking?
As I said, I think, to me, I think as long as people remember me fondly and with a positive memory, to me, that's the biggest legacy I can leave behind.
I mean, if someone was to ask me to describe you, one of those adjectives would be kind. Kindness. Is that something that you physically, mentally think about, or it's just inculcated down who you are?
It's after you take a few hard knocks
Yeah.
that it sort of comes in. And every time I have to give a negative message to somebody, I try to think about how I used to take that negative message or how I have taken that negative message in the past.
Yeah.
And that suddenly sort of influences the way I would deliver.
You know that unfortunately for some people, they become poisonous after they get hard knocks. It tears them down and they can't, one great definition of success for me is how high you bounce once you reach rock bottom, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. Okay, professional rapid fire. What's the most challenging market you've worked in and why?
I think definitely the stint in Australia was the most challenging. As I said, I moved from a large organization into a startup mode. This was just after the dot-com bust had happened and I was trying to sell technology. So it was a perfect storm.
Okay. That was good. And it was good because it was early on in your career to shape you positively.
Correct.
How do you stay ahead in a constantly evolving investment landscape?
I think it's just getting tougher and tougher. There is no easy answer to that.
Yeah.
What helps me is I'm fortunately passionate enough that first thing I do wake up in the morning is digest information, devour information. The whole day I'm doing that. The weekends I'm doing that. When I'm on holiday, I'm doing that. Because the innate nature of this investments landscape is curiosity and then over time learning to distill information into insight.
Yeah, that's brilliant. In terms of how do you keep yourself mentally and physically afresh? What is your daily routine? Because again, stamina, balance, outlasting everyone is not easy. 3 decades, been in the business.
So to me, I think sports has been a very integral part of the journey. Without that, I don't think I would be able to do it. These days, I think the way life works for me is more often than not during the week, the first hour of the day is spent either exercising or sports.
Okay. You get it done early, right?
I get it done early and
same.
then that helps set me up for the day.
Yes.
And as I said, the weekend, the weekends where I don't play football, I'm usually not a good person to be around.
What's one leadership that you've learned the hard way from purely a leadership perspective?
I think more than leadership, what I would say is that what I've learned here, and I did a stint, I volunteered with the Singapore Army for a few years. And what I learned there has really stayed with me. And what they teach you there is they say, when everyone is looking at you, then there's always a natural tendency for you to do the right thing. The key thing is when nobody is looking at you, to still do the right thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
How was that? So you did that, was it at the weekends or how?
Combination. There were times when I used to just do the normal routine of the S500 and spend the whole week doing some volunteer work. Sometimes it was on the weekend as well.
Did you get to blow any things up or anything like that?
So Yes, I did train on the SAR 21. That's part of our
Yeah.
job. So loved it. Yes.
I love that, man. Good for you.
Yeah.
If you were starting your career from scratch today, what are the things you would do a little bit differently and why? Not to look back and say, I didn't like that, but what would you change a little bit?
I would definitely be pay more attention to how my actions are influencing the perception that people around me are building about me.
Can you give me an example?
As I said, I used to be a very hard-nosed, outcome-oriented person.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I was a bad person or that I hated somebody, etc. It was just the biggest thing in my head that time was the task.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that by being so focused on the task, sometimes I'm probably creating a perception around me
Yes.
that is not always the right perception.
No, and I love that you're introspective, and thanks for sharing that because not a lot of people would. Is there a habit or a belief that you've unlearned over the course of your career that you really feel has helped you?
Procrastination.
Yeah.
I used to be a master at that. But over time, I've learned that you just have to have the discipline to get into the weeds and deliver and be active.
I love that, get into the weeds, because a lot of people put off what they can do today to tomorrow.
Correct.
But then at the end of the week, month, year, quarter, whatever, you're stacked against it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's hard. What's the best career advice that you've ever received?
As I said, I think during one of the stints I did with a mentor, and this was a time when I was struggling and questioning myself as to why I wasn't vertically growing. And this whole concept of vertical versus lateral growth, I just totally dig that concept. And from there on, I've never really looked back.
That's brilliant. It's beautiful. What's a professional risk that you're glad that you took?
The move away from my country, the move away from a cushy job with a very well-known large organization into a startup mode, the move into a totally different industry from banking into financial services technology. All of that, I think, was a big risk, and I'm glad I took the risk because I've definitely become richer and I've grown personally because of that.
You see, when I talk to people, and this is not necessarily about changing companies, it could be internally, but the reality is when you look back at your career, it's when you did take that jump, when you put yourself under the most pressure. Because I always ask this question, one of my favorite questions, and I'll ask you now, what was the best quarter of your career? And I don't mean to define it by money, AUM, revenue, earnings, but in terms of when you look back and think, that's where I learned the most. I enjoyed it. Maybe I hated it in the moment, but afterwards, that was the best quarter. Could you say, best year period?
I think several things pop up, just not one thing, but of late in the recent few years, when I was the investments head at one of my, older firm that I worked with, we got all the 16, 17 countries together in one place here in Singapore. And it gave me the opportunity to interact with people from so many different countries in a sort of very concentrated, capsuled manner. We did a lot of sessions together. I think that was, hands down, one of the most satisfying. It wasn't something that was planned. I had a lot to do with trying to sort of orchestrate that. So, totally enjoyed that. It was one of the highlights.
And lovely. Last question, because I am curious about this. In terms of habits, what's the one habit that you can speak to that really has helped your career?
So when I decide something,
Yeah,
I am super committed to making it happen.
love that.
And that has really helped me. And it's not just the career, also in my personal life. I think the discipline in making sure that I follow through with my commitments, I think that helps me a lot.
That conviction, it means everything, right? Because I'll give an example. I was talking to someone yesterday in Hong Kong who has kind of decided he wants to come back to Singapore. And I said, well, have you spoken to your wife? And he said, yeah, but my wife said, I don't even have an offer. I said, you can't think like that. You need to do a fast forward scenario. Let's pretend they make you an offer. Do you want to come? Because if you interview with a CEO and they can sense your wishy-washy, you're not going to get the job offer. Decide that first. And if you're not sure, then let's not move forward. And I think he was a bit surprised. I said, no, you should know ahead of time. Why mess around?
Very true.
Well, you can't waste time with.
Don't
senior
hedge your
people.
bets.
You can't, right?
Yes.
All in. Sameer, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed our chat, man.
As much, yes. Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Brilliant.